Yo, hello, my name is Westbam and welcome to another Cinema 4D tutorial. Today I want to show you how I made this animation. It are some balls rolling down a slide and in the end they form a text or a word. Now the trick what I'm going to show you today is about combining a fixed path for the balls and some real physics to make the balls rolling into Cinema 4D. I will not be using any plugins or anything extra except for the standard stuff that is inside Cinema 4D version R16. So let's get rolling. I'm first gonna make the slide. Well, the slide is basically a helix that is swept with an arc shape and then we get the slide shape. So first let me set up the helix. Click on the helix. The plane is wrong, XY, I'm gonna make it XZ. And now it's orientated the right way. I'm gonna make it a bit bigger, so 400 by 400 and 400 for the height as well. For the angles 560, so it has 1.5 rotations. And we're gonna sweep it with an arc, so let's make an arc. This is my arc. The helix goes in the sweep, the arc goes in the sweep. And we already have a upside down little slide. Now there's one little problem, the banking. You see the angle over here and the angle over here. That's the banking. So click on the sweep and disable banking. And now everything is pointing the same direction all along our spline. Okay, nice. Let's set up the arc. Click on the arc. Change the type to ring. So it has some thickness here. And if we now play with the angles, we can shape a little slide like so. I think the slide is a bit too thick now, so I'm gonna make it a bit lower, 100 or maybe even less. And for the inner radius, of course, it has to be less than the outer radius, something like this. Change the angles a bit more. I think this looks cool. And here we have a little slide. Now we need to set our caps for the sweep. So click on the sweep, go to the caps, and we're gonna make a fillet cap. The default from 5 is okay. Just gonna change the steps to 5. And for the end, of course, the same. And 5 steps. And if we render now, our little slide is done. Okay, this was the easy part. Now next I want to position my slide a bit above our ground. So let's go to the side view or the right view. And if you don't know how to jump between these views, it's just pressing the middle mouse button. And in the right view, I'm just going to select the sweep and move it up. So it's right above my y-axis. And now it's above the ground. Let's jump back to my perspective view. I could make the appearance of my slide even better by introducing a subdivision surface and just drag the sweep in there. And if we hit render now, everything is way more soft and rounded. If you like this, this is cool. But for now, I'm going to turn it off because it also kills my rendering times. And I think now it's time to introduce our ball. So let's make a simple sphere. And this will be the ball that is rolling. Now we're going to start off with one ball first to keep it simple. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a path that's going from the beginning of the slide to the end of the slide. And then when the ball leaves our slide, it's going to be splitting up to 4 separate locations to form the text. I'm going to use 4 balls today to keep it a bit more simple. Okay, first things first, the ball, it's a bit big. Now it's set to 100 centimeters, but if I click on the arc, my inner radius is 73 centimeters. So let's change the sphere to 73. And also if I click on the sweep, because I got the caps on, I need to enable the constraint. Now look closely what happens here. Everything is now constrained in the size of my arc. So this is good. Okay, for the path. Well, for the beginning, I'm going to use a copy of this helix because it's the same route. And then in the end, I'm going to draw a spline, attach it to the helix, and then we got our final path. So let's quickly make a copy of the helix. You can select the helix, hold down the control key or command on Mac, I think. And you drag out the helix. And now you made a copy. And here you can see the path it's going. So this is cool. Now, in order to let this sphere follow this path, I need to make a Cinema 4D tag and align to spline tag. And now the tag is on my ball. And if you click on the tag, over here you see a spline path. And you just drag in the helix, the copy. And now my ball is inside our slide. And if you play with the position, you can move the ball all around the slide, up and down. So next we're gonna extend this path. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make my helix editable. This button, or press the C key, it's both the same. And now my helix is editable. The path I'm gonna draw it in the top view. That's over here. But since I am not really sure where to begin, I think it's around here. I'm going back to the perspective view, go to point mode, and select the very last point. That's this one. And if I now go to top view, I know where to start. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. The path I'm going to make is a simple Bezier spline, and it goes from here to somewhere around here. Let's firstly select nothing, and then I go from here to here to here. Just a simple path. We're gonna fix everything later, but this is okay for now. So let's jump back to our perspective view and see what we got. Well, this is our path. And now we need to connect our spline and our helix together. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to select them both. So hit Shift, click on the helix and the spline. Now they're both selected. Right click and click Connect Objects. And now we got a copy, and that's both our new pad and our old pad, so we can delete these two. And now for the helix part, I want to have this point and this point connected because it's a bit weird. Now the way to do that, I'm going to my point mode, to my selection tool, holding down Shift, I'm going to click here, and I got both points selected, and now I can weld them together. Now I could either go to Mesh, Create Tools, Weld, or you can press the short key, that's MQ. And now you got the weld tool, and now you can say I want to weld it here, here, or here. Now I want to weld it on this point, so I'm going to click on this point, and now everything is welded. Great. And now we made everything one continuous path. Now a few more things. Let's zoom out a bit so we can see everything. I'm going back to my selection tool and my point mode. Holding down Shift, I'm going to select the 3 points I just made for my line. Oh, that's just too much. Control. And now with these 3 points selected, I'm going to right click and I'm going to do soft interpolation. And this way my whole path will be way more smoother. And basically that's it for the path. So click on the Align to Spline tag, and now the spline path is gone because our helix is gone. And we're going to drag in our new path. And let me quickly rename this path so we know what it is. And now if I play with the position tool, we can position our ball all along the path. Now there's one little weird thing, as you might see. Right around here I'm at 69%, 79%, and boom, it jumps. And this isn't really smooth, so the way to fix that, you're going to click on your path, and for the intermediate points you click on Uniform. And this way all these points will be aligned uniform along our path. And if you now play with the position, you will see it makes a lot more sense now. Okay, cool. And by the way, this is the animation we're going to make. So instead of 1 ball, I want to use 4 balls. So I need to make 4 spheres and 4 paths, 1 for each ball. So let me drag the sphere next to my path. And since every path is going to be a letter, I'm just going to name everything. So this is the W for the first one. And I'm going to select them both. Hit Control and drag down. You have a copy. Do it again and do it again. And this one will be the E, because I'm going to write West. That's my... Of course I could have made Westbam, but then I have to do it 7 times. So for the sake of this tutorial, I keep it at 4. And now let's jump back to the top view. And we're going to relocate the endpoints of our path. So I'm going to select the path for the E. Go to the point mode, select the last point and just drag it to the right, like so. Get the S, go to the last point, drag it next to it, and of course for the T, last point, just drag. And now we got 4 positions for our 4 balls, and we can of course always come back and fix this, but as you can see the routing for these balls, especially for the last one, is a bit weird, so I'm going to select this point as well, and I'm just going to drag it to the right a tiny bit, and then we're going to do the same for the S, tiny bit, and for the E. And I think now my 4 paths look a bit more natural. Okay, nice. Next we need to tell the Align to Spline tag which path it should use. So we're going to click on the E, and we're going to drag our E in. For the S, we're going to drag our S in. And for the T, I'm going to drag my T in. And the W was already correct. And now we got 4 balls. So let's position these correctly on our slide. And I think I want to do it in reverse, so the T is going to be here, and then the S, and then the E, and then the W. So let's get the T dynamic stack and scroll the position all the way to the beginning. Get the S and scroll that back. Let's zoom in a bit so we can see what we're doing. You see, you want them close, but of course they should not touch each other. So 2 is too much, 2.5 perhaps. Well, let's make it 2.7, something like this. Let's do the same for the E, so this one. And there it comes. This is too much, this is too far. I don't know, 5.8, 5.5, something like this. Cool. And the W, scroll her down, and there she comes. Let's see, 8.3, I think. Cool. So this is the begin position of our balls, and the end of our path is the end position of our balls. So now we can animate this. I'm going to jump to the beginning of my animation, and I could do this 4 times, but I'm going to do it the easy way. So I'm going to hold down the shift and select my 4 tags, and then I'm going to set a keyframe for the position. Next I'm going to jump to the end of my animation. That's at frame 90. And I think I want to have some more frames, 180, so this takes around 6 seconds. And let's drag this slider over, and now we got 180 frames. And let's go to the end again. I'm going to select all my tags again, and I'm just going to type in 100 for 100% and make a keyframe. So our animation is done, and let's see how it looks. Let's go to the beginning, press play. Our balls are sliding down, and here they are. Okay, cool. Well, not really cool, because halfway here, somewhere, you see they start touching each other. So one easy trick to fix this that I found is just to make the first ball go a bit faster than the second ball, and so on. And the way we're going to do that, I'm going to jump to my layout animation, and I'm just going to offset all my frames a little bit. So let's see where they start to intersect. Okay, that's here. So I want to make my first ball go a bit faster than my second ball, and so on. So let's grab the first ball, offset it a little bit, the second ball, offset her a little bit, and the third ball, offset her a little bit. And if we now slide to our animation, the balls are never touching each other. So I think this is okay. Well, that's it for our keyframes. Now I need to introduce some dynamics to make the balls rotate. So let's jump back to our normal layout and let's add some dynamics. Okay, of course I need a floor object, so my balls have something to roll on. And as you can see, my balls are below the floor, but let's hope we can fix that when we're gonna introduce our dynamics. So for our floor object, I want to make a collider tag, so right click, simulation tag, collider body. And now my floor is just a collider and everything can roll and bounce off it. And my balls are going to be a rigid body, so click on the W, right click, simulation tag, rigid body. And let's do it one ball at a time, because it's easy to see what we're doing. And if I now scroll back in time and I press play, ball number 1 is just falling down. Okay, I also need to give my slide a dynamic stack, of course, so let's jump back to the beginning of our animation. Right click on my subdivision surface, simulation tag, collider body. And for the collider tag on the slide, if you go to the collision tab, you need to change the shape from automatic to static mesh. And if I now enable my subdivision surface and hit play, my ball is starting very slow and it's not following the path anymore. But that's not a big problem, because in our rigid body tag, under the force tab, there is this force follow position. And if we change that, we can mix our path and our physics all together in one go. Now I did some experimentation and I found that a value of around 12 works best for this. So I put this on 12. And if I now press play, my ball is following the path, it's rotating, and it's even stopping at the end of our path. Now as you can see, it's rotating like crazy, and let's fix that by adding some drag, and the drag is for the aerodynamics. And if I put this to around, I don't know, 25%, and if I hit play now, the rotation is not so hard anymore, and it even stops here at the end. So this is cool. As you might also see, there's not enough friction on our slide and on our floor and on the balls. Our friction is a bit too icy, and to fix that, we're going to click on collision. And over here there's friction, and if we crank this up to 75%, and also for the floor and the slide, friction 75, and for the floor tag 75. And if we now press play, the rolling of the balls looks way more natural. But I do think it rotates a bit too fast. So I'm going to tweak one more thing. And that is the angular damping. So click on the tag of the letter, go to force, and add some damping for both linear and angular. And I'm really not sure what this does, but if you play back the animation now, our little ball looks way more natural, I think. So, cool, this is ball number 1, and it works like it should. So let's copy this tag to our other balls, and we are done with our animation, and we can start texturing it. So hold down the control key, drag this dynamics body tag to the E, do it again for the S, and do it again for the T. Go to the beginning of our animation, press play. And it goes a bit slow now because there's a lot of calculations going on. But the balls roll down the slide pretty natural, and they follow their own path. Okay, cool. I think now it's a good time to save my work, so I'm gonna save it in my tutorials folder. Let's call this tutorial slide. I'm gonna number this 1 because it's version 1, and save it. Now, before we continue with the texturing, I really want to bake my animation, so we can scrub to our timeline without too much trouble. And before you bake your animation, you have to be sure that your animation is perfect. And at the moment, it really isn't. If we jump to the end of our animation, we see our final shot over here. And I really don't like the way the balls are placed. So, before baking, let's fix this. I'm gonna select the W, the E, the S and the T. I'm holding down the control key. And then I jump to the top view, and with the point mode selected, I'm going to the rectangle selection tool, and I can select the last 4 points. And I think I want to have them a bit closer to my slide, and a bit like this. I think this should look more natural. And also let's see if we can get all these points a bit closer and a bit more evenly spaced. I think the W is good, so let's start with the E, the path for the E. Well, the last point is already selected, so I'm just going to slide it over a bit. Let's select the S, slide that over. And the T. And I think this position is a bit better. Now, as you might see, the third and the fourth ball are a bit too spaced off, so let's fix that as well. Jumping back to the S, move it a bit closer. To the T, move that a bit closer. Let's move the timeline to reset our animation a bit. I think the spacing is now way better, and also it's a bit closer to my slide, so my final shot will look better. I think this position is good. Now there's one more thing I want to do. I'm going to select all my paths again, and then with the rectangle selection tool, I'm going to select the last 2 points, or these 8 over here. And if I now right click on them and I do one more soft interpolation, our path is way more perfect. Okay, cool, now it's time to bake it. So go to the edit, project settings, and under here in dynamics there is this cache tab where it says bake, but also on the expert it says the steps per frame and the maximum iterations per step. And if we crank this up to 50 and 50, go back to cache and we bake. The whole simulation will take a lot longer, but since this is a one-time process, it's worth it. And with the power of editing, we can speed this up. So now my animation is baked, and if I press play, you might see that the animation runs almost in real time. And here we have. The cool part is we can also scrub to our timeline to jump between frames. How cool is this? Okay, let's jump to the end of our animation, and this will be our last shot. So now it's time to introduce our text. Well, the text is simply a MoGraph motext, and instead of using a text, I'm going to use one letter, the W. And let's find a cool font. Something like this would be interesting, I think. But the problem is if I drag this letter inside this ball, we will not see it. So let's make this ball transparent. Now there are two ways to do it. We can either jump to display and to lines, or, and I think I'm going to do that, we're going to give the balls a gloss texture. And since we need a gloss texture anyway, I think that is the preferred method. So let me jump back to Gorat Shading Lines. And let me double click here to make a new material. Double click on the material and you'll open its properties. And for glass, well, I just want some transparency. So enable that. And in the transparency tab, I'm going to change some settings. I think I want it 99% transparent. For the refraction, I did some testing and 1.15 was cool. So the letters inside my balls will deform a bit. My testing also showed me that a value of 1.5 and higher is not advisable, and anything below 1 is not advisable. The Fresnel reflectivity, well, it's a bit bright, so let's crank it down to, I don't know, 60%. The absorption color, well, this is the color that our ball is going to be, and I'm going to make it a slight pale pinkish color. And for now, our glass is good to go. So let's drag the glass onto our W. Hold down the control key, drag it on the E. Keeping the control key pressed, drag it on the S and on the T. And now my balls are transparent. Okay, this is my motext. I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to change its name to W. And I'm going to make it a child of the first ball. I'm simply going to the four-way view and let's see if we can drag this letter inside our ball. Now, as you also might see, the letter is way too big. Hit the scale tool or the T on the keyboard. Scale the letter down a lot. Press the E or the move tool, it's this one. And see if we can position it inside the ball. Press T to scale it down again. And I'm just jumping between E and T to make the letter fit inside my ball. I also think my text is a bit thin, so I'm going to click on the text, go to the depth and increase it. And just make it however you want to. Let's see in my side view how it looks. Press O to zoom in on your object. So a bit higher perhaps. And I think my W is now perfect inside my ball. I think I want some caps, so I'm going to click on the W. Add a fillet cap for the back and the front. I think it's a bit too big. One should be enough. 2 steps. This is just however you want it. Okay, next I'm going to give this letter a texture. So double click here and let's make a new texture. One thing I found out is that if I put a transparent texture inside a transparent object, it looks even cooler. So let's enable the transparency and bring it down to 60%. Refraction is not needed. And also a bit of luminance to make the colors pop. And instead of white, I'm going to use a pink color. Bright pink. This should be nice. The color itself, well, let's also make it bright pink. The brightness of the luminance channel, it's a bit too high, so let's crank it down to 60%. And I think we got a cool texture for our letter now. So let's drag it onto our W. And here we have our letter. Okay, cool. Now we need to make a copy of this letter, so hold down the control key. Drag this W as a child of the E. We made a copy. Do it again for the S and the T. And this one will be the E. I go to the object and I just type in the letter E. Now the E is inside here, but we're going to fix that later, of course. The same for the S. Inside my text, make it an S. And the same for the T. So inside my text, we're going to make it a T. Now the easiest way to do this, go in the front view, zoom out a bit, select the E and just move it over, like so. Select the S and move it over, and select the T and move it over. Well, here we have our letters inside our balls. And if I drag my timeline, you see that the letters stick and everything works perfect. Well, I think this is a good moment to save it again. So File, Save As. And I'm going to save it as number 2 tutorial slide. And before we continue with the lights and our little studio, I think it's best to make a camera animation. I know it's the other way around, but making a camera animation first makes it easier to place the lights, because you are only interested in what the camera sees anyway. So let's make a camera. Press this button, so this is what the camera sees from now on. And for the focal length, I think I'm going to make it a 50mm lens now, just to make it a bit special. Before I animate the camera, I first want to make my animation a bit longer. It's now set to 180 frames, so that's 6 seconds. I'm going to make it 300 frames, so that's 10 seconds. So we got some little room at the end to play with our animation. Well, before you make your animation, first you need to go to your render settings and be sure that your width and height is the way you want it to look. This for me is perfect. This is half HD, and for this tutorial it works nice. So I'm going to jump back to the perspective view, scrub to the beginning of my animation and find a nice place to start my first shot in. Probably something like this is nice, I think. So with my camera selected, I'm going to hit a keyframe. And I move over a few frames. And right around here, when the balls leave the slide, I think I want to see this as well. So I'm going to set a keyframe around here. And this is the animation we got so far. Okay, cool. Now from here to the last frame, 180. I want to turn around, zoom out, so we can read our letters. Something like this. And then for my final shot, I want to zoom out even further, move up a tiny bit. Something like this. So make another keyframe. And now I got this animation going on. Press play. I think this looks pretty okay, pretty nice. The ball's already textured. We need one more texture for the slide and one for the floor. But if I render this now, you see it looks a bit dull, but this is because there is no reflection on the balls. So to fix this, I'm gonna build a very fake and easy light studio. All it takes is a cube, and this cube, it's down here. I'm gonna make it 10 high. I'm gonna put this in a cloner, so a MoGraph cloner. And the cloner will be set to grid array 3 by 1 by 3. And now we're gonna drag everything out until we see the separate cubes. And here we have something to reflect in our scene. Now it needs a material, and I found a very simple super bright luminance material. So just enable the luminance channel, super bright, like 300%. And let's drag this onto our cloner. So if we render this now, you see the reflection of the thing we just made inside our balls. I also need a light in there actually, so I'm gonna make a light. Now let's move this light into our little box over here. And if you hold down the control and click on the light and the cloner, and then press Alt-G, you group them together, and we can call this, I don't know, fake window. And let's move our fake window around a bit. The camera is over here, so I need one over here, and perhaps one in the front. So let's move it up and away. Hit the R for rotate, rotate it a bit, that's how it aims on the balls. Gonna make a duplicate of this, so hold down control, drag it down, hit the E for move, and let's move this one over here somewhere. Rotate it to face the balls, and it already looks a lot better if we render. Now I think I want to make one more window on the front here for our final shot. So I want a copy of these windows somewhere around here, so I'm gonna copy it again, control, drag down, hit the E for move, move it over, somewhere around here. Hit the R for rotate. And aimer on the balls. And if we render it now, we got the reflections of all the windows inside our balls. Okay, let's make another texture. And I keep it at the default, and I'm just gonna drag it onto the floor. And I'm gonna make another texture. And this one is for my slide. So I'm gonna call it slide. And for this one, well, I don't know, we're gonna pick a color. Let's keep it a bit pink bluish, I think. The reflectance, well, it's a bit too reflective, I think, so I'm gonna lower the reflectance. And I'm gonna give it a little bump map, or actually a very large bump map. So click on the bump map, go to the noise channel, click on the noise preview, and here I'm just gonna scale her up a lot, 500% or something. And in the bump, gonna make it, I don't know, 2%. And if you render it now, everything is way too white and the letters are very ugly. So let's fix that. The lights in my window, I forgot to color them. So just select all the lights. And over here in the general tab, let's color it a bit. I think I'm gonna color it purplish. Something like so should work. Perhaps a little less intense. So I'm gonna make it, I don't know, 80%. And if I render it out now, my scene looks like this. Well, one problem I already see is that these balls seem to float, and that's because there is no ambient occlusion. So click on your render settings, and for the effect enable ambient occlusion. And if I now render this out, the rendering should take a bit longer, but you see we got some nice shadows and some nice places where the balls are touching the ground. And let's see how it looks from the side. And you see, this was the magic while we baked our animation, because now we can just scrub to our timeline and everything is still looking perfect. Well, I'm not quite happy with the way my slide looks. Actually, I think I'm gonna make it a bit more reflective. And I think I'm even gonna add some reflection, some backman. And I think if I just make this a 10%, there's way more reflection, so it should be a bit cooler. And also for the color, I don't like this blue, so I'm gonna make it purple as well. Something like this. And if you now hit the render key, it still looks weird, and that is because I totally forgot to drag my material onto my slide. I wondered why it looks so weird, but I forgot that part. So nice. As you can see, we got some rim highlights from our windows. Black in the distance, and that's all gone. This ugly white mess, well, that's because there is no light underneath here. So we can actually just fix that by making one more light. Why not? I make another light. Now it's the center of my slide, because that's the center of my world. Gonna drag her up a tiny bit. Let's make her, I don't know, 50%. And if we render this out now, everything actually looks way too bright. But for now I think it's okay. I'm gonna leave it like this, because this tutorial is long enough as it is already. One last thing you really want to fix, it's the anti-aliasing. You see it over here very clearly. So just jump to your render settings, hit the anti-aliasing button, set it to best, and set it to Gauss animation, because we're working with animation. And if we now render our scene one more time, and here it is, the letters look nice and crisp. Only the way the floor is reflecting, I don't really like it, but I think that is because I'm using this ugly default gray. So let me double click on it again. And let's make it a bit darker. So now our floor is a lot darker. And for the reflectance of my slide, I'm also gonna crank everything down a little bit. And let's see what we got now. Now this final stage of your animation is just a lot of tweaking and doing and trying. And we can spend 30 more minutes on this to make it look perfect. But the big trick was to get the balls, the path and the dynamics working all together. But I think for now I've showed you enough. I really do hope you learned something, you picked up some tricks. My name is Westbam, and thanks again for watching. And I'll see you all next time for my next tutorial.